So a Section 106 agreement is an agreement between a landowner and a local planning authority, and effectively they covenant with one another. So from a landowner perspective, it's covenant to do and not to do certain things. That's the same for the local planning authority as well. If that land is subject to a mortgage, then you'll also need the mortgagee, the lender, to be a party to that 106 agreement. Yes, so Langley Abbey Environment Project is a 600-acre developer-funded nature reserve spanning South Norfolk and the Broads. We operate a habitat banking model whereby we create and enhance habitats in advance, and then we use the uplift in biodiversity that those actions generate, and we can allocate them to developers to help them achieve biodiversity net gain. The project's been delivered in phases, and we've just secured the legal agreement for phase 1 of the project. That's going to detail how we manage the land for the next 30 years, and it's also going to enable us to register those units with Natural England, and we can then go on and allocate them to developers. Yeah, I think it's definitely been slower than anticipated. I think it's fair to say that the council were probably less prepared for BNG than they perhaps would have liked to have been, and officers were really struggling to process the volume of planning applications that had been building up because of things like nutrient neutrality in our part of the country. But we spent a bit of early time with the LPA explaining the process, particularly from an offsite perspective. And as officers became more familiar with the process, then we were able to make progress with our agreement. So I think for the time being, my advice would be to exercise patience and just acknowledge that things may not be as straightforward or as simple as perhaps they ought to be. I think it means that the agreement did what it needed to do, and that is probably good advice for any legal agreement. Your drafting should only be as complicated as it needs to be. And whilst there's perhaps some uncertainty around BNG and how it works, if you look at the regulations that underpin it, it's relatively straightforward. And so from a drafting perspective, if you can utilize those regulations, work through them, and cross-refer to the defined terms within them, then you ought to be able to produce a relatively straightforward agreement. Yes, I was fortunate enough to be able to draw on experiences from private practice, working with clients to achieve local plan, BNG, and nutrient neutrality. But there was also templates that existed at the time from the likes of Warwickshire and Devon and Buckinghamshire, some of the sort of pioneering councils that entered into local plan BNG much earlier than it took effect nationally. I think in the last sort of 9-10 months, many LPAs will have been devising their own templates, either consciously or perhaps inadvertently by working with projects like ours. And even those that perhaps haven't had an offsite provider come forward, then they'll be able to look to neighbouring LPAs and see what they produced. And there's also some further templates that have come out, such as the one that the Planning Advisory Service has recently published. I think we will no doubt see AI play a greater and greater role in legal drafting. But I'm much more excited about the role that it can play in the sort of practical delivery of BNG projects. So I'm thinking about things like site appraisal and the monitoring of habitats. That's what, where I see the real value add of AI. And I think that's where the excitement is. And it's been great to see the reception that BNG AI has got since its launch. I suspect that across the whole country, projects like ours have been paving the way for others to come forward much more swiftly and easily. So I think we will see more projects come onto the register shortly. In terms of challenges, I think the greatest challenge is the relative lack of demand for offsite units. And I think that more can be done to incentivize developers to look strategically at offsite units and to see where we can get that private sector finance invested into nature restoration. Because in most instances, it's sort of off-site locations that can deliver the most meaningful benefits for local nature recovery. Yeah, I think early engagement is key. Even now, 9 months on from its introduction, BNG is still quite novel to some people. And so I try and gauge from the outset the sort of level of experience that officers and lenders have had with BNG, and then manage your expectations accordingly. From a lender perspective, I've noticed that they seem to be taking a very cautious approach, and will ultimately want to know the value of their security, the level of their security, if you effectively take the land that will be subject to BNG and you give it a nil value. So from a landowner perspective, you may want to front load that exercise, because ultimately, if the land is subject to a mortgage, then you're going to need the lender to be a party to the agreement. And if they don't feel comfortable in the level of security, then they're unlikely to enter into the agreement. So you perhaps want to avoid that legal process and investing those costs into that legal process until you know that you've got a lender that would be willing to enter into that agreement. So we've got a second legal agreement that we've just begun with the Broads Authority, and that's to secure the creation of the Lowland Meadow and also the enhancement of the ditch network across the estate. We've been engaging with officers from the Broads Authority for the best part of a year now, and they've been super supportive. So it's really quite exciting now to be able to sort of finally extend the project into the national park.